Good evening. Dobry večer, good evening. It's good to have you back with us. I assume most of you have joined us for the previous lectures. Hello, good evening. Perhaps you can let me know again in the chat if you can hear me and see me, just to double check. And perhaps you can mention in the chat how many lectures you have followed so far. Have you followed all of them or not? My colleague Jelena Cipanina just put in the chat that we have, of course, translation available again. U nas jest perevod. I hope you remember how it worked. Axam mentioned that he has seen all the lectures so far. That's great. We're very happy with dedicated participants. That also means that you can hear me and see me. That's wonderful. I hope the others can as well. So if someone, good evening, yes. Oh yes, it's Sliesner, great. And perhaps it's nice because we have new speakers tonight. Maybe you can let us know again from what city you are. So both our speakers and our moderator, Pascal. And Pascal, why don't you join me, of course, already? Why don't you let us know from what city you are listening in from? Hi, Pascal.
Hi, Jacke.
Hi.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, yes. Moskva, we have Moscow with us. Chelyabinsk, Yekaterinburg. Somebody is in two cities at the same time. St. Petersburg, Kurgan, Prekrasny v Moskvе. It's great in Moscow. Donetsk, Ukraine, Perm, Ufa, Kaluga, Novosibirsk, Arkhangelsk, Kaliningrad, Almaty, Perm, Ryazan, Syktyvkar. Wow, we have a very diverse geography again, which is wonderful. Peter, Moskva. So you see, Pascal, we have to travel to a lot of cities.
I'm quite impressed, Jacke, about the names, the Cyrillic. Of course, you know it very well. For me, it's Moscow, Yekaterinburg, Novos. Okay, Almaty.
Almaty.
Let me try. Mogba. Okay.
Yes. Moscow. But Almaty is Kazakhstan. So we have Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Russia with us. So that's great. Thank you for joining us again this evening, and I think I'll just pass the floor to you, Pascal.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jacke. Dear audience, tonight is already our 5th lecture in this MOOC about Dutch design and architecture. And tonight's course will be about nature-based solutions for cities. Climate change, urbanization, and declining biodiversity pose many challenges to cities around the world. We need nature-based solutions to design cities that are resilient and healthy to live and work in. In this talk, the speakers will elaborate on different aspects of planning a green and probably also blue city, the sustainable response to those challenges. Building a green city requires a systematic approach and involvement of all stakeholders, from the government to every urban dweller. They will give worldwide, both speakers will give worldwide examples of how cities implement nature-based solutions. They will explain a Living Labs approach, where the governance and design of nature-based solutions in cities can be implemented together with all citizens. Actually, the audience, these topics are in Holland, in the Netherlands, on every day in daily news. And one question I would like to raise already to you, which I just found this weekend in the newspapers, is should sustainability be part in each study? Whether you study law, economics, medicine, or history, should sustainability be an obliged topic? After the two speakers gave both lectures, I would like you, the audience, to comment on this question. But first, I would like to introduce, of course, our first speaker of tonight, Marianne Stuyver. Marianne Stuyver is a PhD in agriculture sciences at Wageningen University and Research Center. She is a program leader in green cities. Dr. Stuyver is developing consortia on topics such as sustainable business, climate change, and nature in the city. Marianne is recognized global expert on strategic visioning, science for impact, ethics, and governance. She is developing developing methodologies to connect entrepreneurs, organizations, and policymakers from different backgrounds and cultures for a common goal. Marjan, please join us. And I would like to give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pascal. I hope you can hear me. Maybe someone can confirm that you can hear me. Okay, good. Good afternoon, good evening from Wageningen. I will share my screen with you now. Yes, I think I managed. So welcome from Wageningen in the Netherlands. I just heard that you come all from various parts of Russia. Well, I'm from the Netherlands, which is quite a small country. And as you can see, Wageningen is on the east side and is even a smaller city. But it's a very special city because we have Wageningen University of Research, which is 100 years old. And we are specialized in food, agriculture, and nature. And I will tell you more about it. Today, I will tell you about nature-based solutions for green cities, of which I'm very passionate about. So I will tell you all kinds of aspects, and I invite you also to put your answers and comments in the chat. Now it needs to work. It doesn't work. Yes. Okay, so we all know that we have to wash our hands and everything will be well. That was the message we got 1.5 years ago. So the COVID-19 has put a large burden on our society, and also the recession that everybody was frightened of. But behind this, there is climate change. So even a bigger wave of threats is coming to us, to this small country in the Netherlands, for instance, which is below sea level. And then, of course, biodiversity collapse is even a bigger risk. So we are all, cities in the world are all facing huge challenges. And the first one is the urgency of climate. So urban climate action is at the heart of the European Green Deal, and it's essential to achieving a global Green Deal. Said by Frans Timmermans. He is the European Commissioner for the European Green Deal. And in the global risks outlook of 2021, we can see that all the global risks that are gathered to are really important. If you look on the above right side, which is biodiversity and climate change. Climate justice, that's another thing, is what we experience is that people that suffer most from climate change are the people that also are actually contributing the least to it. So the rich countries, they produce the problems of climate change, but the poorer countries, they get the threats more. So climate justice is a very important issue as well. And as last but not least, biodiversity recovery. What we could do is do business as usual, and then we will be sure that biodiversity will even more decline. So there is an absolute necessity to focus on biodiversity recovery. So why am I telling you this? That these challenges, they all come together in the design of green cities for the future. So climate and biodiversity action is really needed. And today I will focus on the Netherlands, because I think this is in itself a nice case of a delta. The Netherlands is, as you can see, a delta where the River Rhine and other rivers go into the North Sea. And this picture you see here is what Dutch citizens expect what will happen with climate change if we have the 1.5 centimeter sea level rise. It will mean that the Netherlands is partly, almost for half, underwater. That's what people expect. And that's, of course, not such a nice vision for the future, because what do we need to do? We need climate action now. That's why we propose to have nature-based solutions. And I will talk about that, of course, more in depth. The nature-based solutions puts nature at the heart of any development. So very often in policy and planning, when cities are planned, or when large neighborhoods are developed, houses are built, nature always comes last. And we say nature has to come first. And how can we do that? Well, first of all, we have to start with the natural system as a starting point. So landscape, soil, and the water system cannot be neglected anymore if we start planning for a city or a neighborhood, or even if you build your own house. What is the landscape that you are in? What is the condition of the soil, and what will happen with the water system once you start building it? Water is a leverage, so water needs to be retained, reused, and stored and drained. So water, soil, and landscape, very essential as a starting point. Then we need more, another different type of economy. The economy needs to be climate positive. We need to reuse our resources, have zero waste, and change our agriculture radically. At the moment, we have an agriculture that contributes to climate change a lot, and we need a circular agriculture in which a waste and loss is a resource instead of a waste and a loss. So the economy needs to change. Fourth, we need adaptive spatial planning. So we have to work with nature and develop nature-based solutions. For instance, if you have a garden, a rain garden, make it a rain garden. If there is a whole neighborhood, make sure that you have a system for your water retention, etc. So last but not least, make a nature inclusive society. People have to think about nature. It's not only about nature-based solutions, it's about nature thinking. So people are quite far away from nature, but they need to understand that nature conservation and biodiversity and ecosystem services are essential. So what does that mean? We draw a map in which what the Netherlands would look like if we really would take nature-based solutions as a starting point. And then what we see is that the cities will go more to the east, where, of course, the land is higher. And we'll very much, well, at the moment, all the cities are more to the sea. So it would make a drastic change of our planning and our city development. At the moment, it's not at all like that. They're still, like in Rotterdam, they are planning whole neighborhoods which is below sea level. So if climate change is really going to happen, what will happen to these houses? So we have to have a positive view how to live with climate change, how to live with nature, the nature in our society. We can do this by using energy and food from the sea and making more use of the water and the sea. So, of course, energy production at sea is already booming, but we can also have much more food production at sea. For instance, seaweed and also fish farms from the sea where people can live from. Then we need more space for the rivers. The Netherlands and also Wageningen is actually positioned at the River Rhine, and the Netherlands used to be a delta before all these people came to live there and the cities were built. And we need to give more space for the rivers again, so that they can also be an active, play an active role in water retention and water use. We can make use of our wetlands to have them as carbon sinks. There are already many parts in the Netherlands where this is done, but this needs to be done much more in a systematic way. And we need plant-based and regenerative food systems. So circular farming, which is a way to keep all your losses inside the farm. So the manure from the cows, the feed and fodder from the land. This can all be made in a circular way. But also the energy you produce on the farm, you can use for the farm. So in that way, you do not have too many losses to the outside world. Our forestry in the Netherlands, not like in Russia. I was in Tomsk in Siberia, and I was amazed by the amounts of trees there. We only have planted forestry. So already the production of forest started in the 30s, and we need to use these forests also as carbon sinks as well, but also to have, for instance, wooden houses instead of concrete houses, and have more circular houses to build. And wood is an excellent way to do that because it's a resource that you can also reuse again. So this all comes down also to having green and healthy cities, and I will talk about this now a bit more in depth, of course, because it's my field of expertise, and also the Netherlands, one could say it is one big delta. People say it's a metropole with parks, because everywhere everybody is living, and there's not wildlife or huge areas where people are not having access to. But this green city, is it a dream? Is it a utopia, or is it a necessity? That's really the question. A lot of people thought 10 years ago this green city is a dream, or maybe even a utopia. But because of the reasons of climate change and biodiversity loss, now it actually becomes a real necessity. And why are there so many reasons to invest in the green city? Well, because we have done a lot of research on it. You can see it also at our website on Greenery in the city. And one is that green really reduces the risk of flooding. So if you, instead of concrete streets and paths, if you invest in more natural paths, but also if you have a lot of parks in your city, you can really organize the water in a much better way during the year. And in the summer, you can have greenery to cool your city, because it's really proven that trees work like air conditioning. So if you have a lot of trees in your garden or around your flat, it's really, really good for people's health. And there are actually more and more people having really problems with the heat, well, in the cities, and can even die from it in summer. So green is really important to cool the city in summer. And this automatically leads to the third one, that green contributes to a better health and increased well-being. I will come to that after this slide with some more examples. Green also contributes to social cohesion. If people have parks and neighborhoods where they can work in gardens, or where they can really, in a safe way, participate in activities in the parks, they get to know each other, and in this way get to learn from each other, meet each other, and this improves social cohesion in an area. But greenery also attracts companies. Places where there's a lot of green, big companies like to be there, because their employees like to, for instance, stay outside and have a walk, or feel much better to go there, or they go there cycling or walking to their work instead of taking the car. So it's also good for your employees and their health to have greenery in your area. Of course, the sixth one, it's very important. Greenery supports biodiversity. Always the idea was that cities are bad for biodiversity, but it's actually possible to have hubs in the city where you really increase biodiversity. If you have a good planning of a new neighborhood, and you make sure that there is room for space for plants and insects and animals, then you can really support the biodiversity in the whole area. So, and last but not least, greens boost the value of houses and offices. This is also a bit of a problem sometimes, because when planners put a lot of emphasis on the greenery in the area, the houses, the value of the houses goes up. And of course, it's for people with less income more difficult than to live in these areas. And as you can see, we say green contributes to a better health and increased well-being, especially the people with lower incomes can benefit more from greenery. So there is a kind of trade-off between having greenery in your area and the risk of gentrification because of the greenery. So one example of a study is that which green contributes to better health and increased well-being is that the lower the percentage of green, the higher percentage of people experience their health as low. So people experience really greenery in their area as a part of their well-being. They in another study, they looked at 24 clusters of illness, for instance, cardiovascular illness, bronchial illnesses, and mental health. And the more greenery, the lower prevalence of these illnesses. The relationship is the strongest with mental health and fear and depression. But that's absolutely important. For instance, if you have people that have cancer and they want to try to cure for cancer with chemo or other types of therapy, if the hospital really has a program to let these people be walking in the green parks around the hospital. We have some hospitals that invested in this. We see that it really boosts people's health, also to cure from cancer. So there is mental health is an essential point, also in physical health. And of course, more greenery is less depression. So there's really a connection between greenery and depression. So of course, depression is also another aspect for many other health issues that people can experience. We have cities that really have adopted this nature-based solutions in their city, but they're actually experimenting with it. So I'll give some examples now, and at the same time, after that, I will explain why I consider them all to be living labs, living laboratories. Because these cities, they experiment with several aspects of greenery in the city. For instance, Rotterdam is really looking at healthy, compact city, but also inclusiveness. How can everybody benefit from the green? Circularity, how can we build with wood? How can we increase the exchange of materials so that we have less losses of materials? And how can we have also a new generation of young people that really know what to do with increasing nature-based solutions and a green city? Because this means that not only academics have to know what to do, but also people that work in the street and people that work in the gardens and build the houses, etc. So Rotterdam wants to be the best green city in the world, and they try to make it happen. Amsterdam especially focuses on nature inclusiveness of their city. So what they do is when a contractor wants to build a new neighborhood, a new flats, or lots of houses, they give a lot of options to for nature inclusiveness. This could be, as you can see, 7 and 1 and 2, all types of things for birds, so that birds can nest, and so you can also go high up in the air and have your greenery in a flat. You can change your roofs. We have the rooftop gardeners and the rooftop alliance that want to invest in green roofs, because the roofs are so much surface in a city that is at the moment underused. But if you make the roofs green, it gives you a lot of cooling in summer, and it gives space for the animals and for the birds. And you can do things on the floor. So for instance, you can make ponds, you can do water infiltration, and it gives space again for toads and frogs in the area. And these eat the insects, so that you can build really new ecosystems in your city. So Amsterdam really wants to encourage contractors and estate developers to implement all these measures. And The Hague, another city, actually already has a pointed system. So if a contractor wants to build, they can collect points based on what types of activities do I do to make the neighborhood nature inclusive. Nijmegen focuses a lot on climate adaptivity because they have a large river going through the city. And what they did is they give space to the river, and the places where the river goes over the shore. So instead of having everything in concrete, it really gets again access to the soil and to the land. These places are also nature-based areas where people can have recreation, but also where birds, insects, and plants can flourish. Then this is my city, Wageningen, small city, as I said, but we have decided to make our whole campus sustainable. So we really look at reducing our CO2 levels. We look at waste recovery, but we also have a lot of space for nature inclusiveness, a green campus where it's nice for the students and nice for the employees to work, to live, and also to recreate in the summer, to sit under a tree. So we try to be an example with our own campus for making a green city. But of course, as I said, Netherlands is in itself a huge metropole, and all these different smaller cities in the Netherlands can work together to make it happen. There are three things that I want to say that are really important if you want to develop green cities. And one is make space for greenery. So here you see a rain garden, which is completely different from a lot of gardens that we know that are mostly concrete and maybe some plants. Here the plants and the water dominate, and the people can, walk on the path, but the path is in the water. So make space for greenery in your own back garden with your neighbors, but also in the planning procedures in the city there where you live in. Make cities climate adaptive. Here you can see the green roofs and the trees. They are if you go there like a bird in the sky, you can basically see that the whole area is green. You have a total green surface. It's absolutely beautiful. And as I said, it's cool in the summer, and it's also good for the water retention when it's raining, for instance. And last but not least, look at the quality of the greenery. Sometimes architects, for instance, really want to have some more plants, and then they talk with someone who says, okay, you should do this plant or that plant, but these plants are not really native to the area, for instance, or they do not attract butterflies or insects that you want. So they are more like aesthetic green. They're not high quality green or functional green. So really ask someone who is an ecologist, who knows what happens in the area, what type of animals and insects are there, what type of greenery should we put here, so that it really adds up to the quality of the greenery in the area and increases biodiversity. So with our NL 21-20, we made a narrative of hope for the next 100 years to come. And we had a lot of attention in the national newspapers and also on the European level. We're working now on a big European project to make a European 21-20, to have a green Europe full of nature-based solutions. And we say there is really a narrative of hope that is needed to have a positive outlook. How can we deal with climate change? How can we deal with biodiversity recovery? Zooming in and zooming out. So living labs are a way to zoom in and to work with the people on achieving these aims. So what is really essential for a living lab, and you can ask questions in the chat about this, maybe we can have a discussion about it later, is that you involve all the actors in a certain real life context. So let it be the public and the private actors, so the governments, but also the businesses in the area, the real estate agents, the architects. Of course, you have to involve the users, the people that live there, the people that recreate there and that work there. And you have to involve the knowledge institutes, because they have to develop expertise and also education for the newer generations to come to implement all these changes. We started these living labs with Heineken. I think you all know from the beer. They said 10 years ago, okay, we want to be more green in our plants. So where we produce the beer, we want to have a circular way of producing the beer, and we want to have a plot where there is space for biodiversity. And there we worked with all these people, so the users, the public actors, the private actors in the knowledge institutes. And these groene cirkels, that's in Dutch, it's green circles, they have now expanded to the whole of the south of Holland. And we also have a green circle on green healthy cities, together with The Hague, Rotterdam, Dordrecht and Delft. And we're going to do a lot of pilots with all these people together to really experiment with nature-based solutions in the city. So, to summarize, living labs focus on knowledge and innovation of all parties, investing in pilots, cooperation between all these different actors like companies, citizens, and knowledge institutions. It's about data collection, knowledge development, and last but not least, scaling up. So from a small pilot in the street or even in your own garden with your neighbors, you can go to a larger area in the city, and you can, in the end, like Rotterdam wants, having more and more and more nature inclusive measures in the city. have lost one slide, which said that now it's time for questions, and the next person, and thank you very much, and where you can reach me, but I will put it in the chat later. So I will put my contact details in the chat, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Well, Marianne, thank you very much. I'm not sure whether you see me, Marianne, or
yes, I do. Okay. But I try
okay.
to get out of this.
Oh.
Just a moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, here
okay.
I am. Yes.
Back to base, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope it was a bit accessible what I said. It's, you know, I'm talking to my own screen, of course. I really would love to see all the people, because I've been in Moscow and Tomsk, and it was one of the best trips of my life, with so many enthusiastic people that also were developing living labs in Tomsk, meeting people in Moscow that were very active on this topic. So I really look forward to speaking with people in the chat or later on in the panel.
Yeah, and we all hope, I think, with everyone that this pandemic, that it will be enlightened soon again.
Yeah.
Thank you again very much, Marianne.
Yeah.
Nabi, may I ask you to join already? Our next speaker is head of the Urban Ecology Center of Stralka KB. At Stralka, he works on creating a more sustainable and resilient urban environment by strengthening the relationship between water, ecology, and cities. He worked at an urban design and landscape architecture firm, Scape, in New York City. There, among other projects, he participated in the design of Ecological Citizens, exhibition for the US Pavilion at the Venice Biennale Architectura in 2018. Nabi, he holds a Master of Science in Architecture and Urban Design and graduate from School of Architecture Planning and Preservation at Columbia University, a Bachelor from New York Institute of Technology, and he is an alumnus of the New Normal postgraduate program at Stralka Institute for Media, Architecture and Design. Nabi, maybe I have a small questions already for you, dear audience. Before Nabi will start, one question: how many rivers do you think Moscow has, dear audience? Please put it in the chat, and Nabi will tell you all about it. Okay, Nabi, the floor is yours.
Спасибо, Паскаль. Я сейчас расширю свою презентацию, и вы мне скажите, если ее видно.
Видно.
Отлично. Да, спасибо за представление. Как уже было сказано, меня зовут Наби, и сегодня мы говорим про nature-based solutions, или как можно перевести на русский как зеленая инфраструктура или природный капитал, природные решения и так далее. На самом деле эти решения имеют множество разных названий, но обычно речь идет об одном и том же. В середине прошлого века, скажем, в 50-х, да, начиная с 49-го года, мы, как архитекторы, дизайнеры, визионеры, представляли себе будущее городов как некое пространство, заполненное небоскребами, с летающими машинами, аппаратами, где у каждого человека имелось свой личный как бы автомобиль, летающий или не летающий. Все мы жили в больших домах и как бы летали по дорогам, двигались очень быстро и так далее. Это как бы было видение, которое драйвило визионеров, урбанистов, градостроителей середины прошлого века, да, где основным двигателем как бы создания пространств городских был автомобиль. Да, это будущее, которое мы надеялись получить. Будущее, которое мы на самом деле получили, это ураганы, наводнения, лесные пожары, тепловые волны и так далее, да, в связи с последствиями изменения климата, да, к чему и привело переиспользование технологий, как автомобиль, да, добыча ископаемого топлива, которое необходимо для этой технологии и так далее. И сейчас у нас получается такая ситуация, где в отличие от того, как в прошлом веке мы были уверены, как архитекторы или дизайнеры, градостроители, как будет выглядеть наше будущее, да, это будущее, где у каждого человека есть автомобиль, роскошная квартира в небоскребе и так далее, то сейчас у нас нет определенного единого понимания, как будет выглядеть будущее. Если мы посмотрим на этот граф, 6-го оценочного доклада от МГИК, это комиссия ученых от организации ООН, межправительная, которая показывает нам сценарий будущего. И что мы понимаем сейчас, это то, что нету какого-то единого сценария будущего, даже если смотрим на этот граф. Да, у нас есть потенциальные сценарии или вероятности как бы разворота событий, которые в этом графе называются Shared Socio-Economic Pathways или общие социально-экономические варианты. По сути, я не хочу вдаваться очень сильно в подробности этого графа, но по сути, что мы видим здесь, это то, насколько будет нагрета наша планета к 2100 году. И каждое увеличение в градусах, да, каждое увеличение в температуре несет за собой определенные последствия. И как мы, как дизайнеры, архитекторы, смотря на это, что должны для себя понять, то, что мы должны разрабатывать наши проекты, наши дизайны таким образом, потому что эти проекты живут намного дольше, чем мы, да, очень много инфраструктуры, которую мы видим сегодня в наших городах, это большие магистрали, эстакады, шестиполосные дороги и так далее, очень часто были проектированы или построены людьми, которые уже не всегда с нами, да, то, что наши проекты очень часто инфраструктурные особенно остаются со следующими поколениями, и теперь как у нас ответственность как у архитекторов этого поколения разрабатывать такие проекты, которые будут по сути быть готовыми к разным разворотам событий, да, быть адаптирующимися, быть гибкими, быть многофункциональными. И получается, что мы одновременно разрабатываем дизайн для 4 разных планет. Да? Это вот наш сценарий SSP 2.6, что означает в 2.6 раз квадратный метр атмосферы будет содержать больше энергии по сравнению с временами до промышленной революции. Да? И SSP 4.5 это в 4,5 раз больше, 7,5 и 8,5 и так далее. Да? По идее, мы должны разработать такие сценарии, где они будут работать в одном из этих будущих, и мы не можем предсказать, какой именно. Вот. И у нас есть 2 направления, да, как мы можем двигаться. Первое направление – это адаптация, второе направление – это предотвращение, да, mitigation, которое часто еще переводится как сглаживание последствий изменения климата, но по сути это означает предотвращение. Чем отличаются 2 направления? Адаптация означает то, что мы адаптируемся к уже случившимся изменениям климата, да, более частым дождям, более сильным дождям, к наводнениям, которые происходят сейчас. И также будем адаптироваться к тем последствиям, которые нас ожидают в будущем. Это что означает адаптация? Предотвращение – это те решения, те дизайн-решения, проекты, которые нацелены на предотвращение повышения температуры в будущем, да, предотвращение самого изменения климата. И это как бы, ну, я думаю, полезно понять, когда мы очень часто слышим 2 этих термина нужно понимать, о чем примерно они говорят. И решения, которые направлены на одно или другое, не всегда как бы либо в одной колонке, либо в другой. Иногда они могут быть как, например, изменение зонирования, да, изменение землепользования в городе, может быть нацелено именно на адаптацию. Да, если у нас река разливается во время паводка, во время наводнения очень сильно, может быть, стоит задуматься об изменении землепользования и как бы убрать оттуда жилые зоны, да, то, что можно, или их нужно определенным способом модернизировать. Да? Или, например, использование альтернативных источников энергии, которые конкретно нацелены на то, чтобы предотвратить изменение климата в будущем. В смысле отойти от использования ископаемых топливов, использовать солнечную энергию, ветреную энергию и так далее. Итак, есть еще другие решения, которые как бы иногда между двух, иногда больше в одном, чем в другом и так далее. Вот. И сегодня то, что мы говорим, это вот nature-based solutions, которые одновременно и нацелены на небольшим как бы, способом на предотвращение, но очень часто, чаще всего мы о них говорим, когда именно говорим об адаптации к изменению климата. И вообще краткая история ландшафта, да, или краткая история природы в культуре или дизайне, мы можем, как бы, посмотрев на эту картину, понять вот традиционный подход к природе в целом, как мы воспринимаем ландшафт в целом. Это обычно то, что висит в музее, что-то очень далеко, на то, что мы смотрим издалека и как бы любуемся, и по сути наше взаимодействие с ним ограничивается нами любованием этого ландшафта издалека. Потом эта как бы идея эволюционирует в то, что природа становится неким инструментом власти, инструментом демонстрации власти, где некие правители начинают как бы спорить с друг другом, у кого больше парк, у кого больше Версаль или что-то в этом роде, где ландшафт начинает занимать роль инструмента демонстрации власти правителя над природой, где мы начинаем смотреть исключительно на эстетические качества ландшафта, начинаем заводить растения или деревья, которые могут быть не местные для этой экосистемы, выравнивать их очень стройно, чтобы, как бы, самое главное, мы эстетически могли любоваться на этот ландшафт, забывая о каких-то функциях его. Да? И, по сути, в середине прошлого века, тоже как бы в 69-м, во время того момента, когда многие дизайнеры и многие градостроители думали о летающих машинах и машинах как основной драйвер урбанизма, зарождается некое движение природы как инструмента дизайна, да, или ландшафта как инструмента урбанизма. И начинается это с архитектора Ян Макарга, с его книги, которая выходит в 1969 году, которая называется «Дизайн с природой». После него, по сути, начинается серия таких книг, серия таких мыслей, которые, если вам интересно, вы можете приобрести и прочитать их, чтобы понять больше суть самого подхода. Идея того, что город – это как некий гранитный сад, да, книга Энн Винстон, или книга «Земляная мозаика» Ричарда Формана и так далее. И двое из них – это были мои профессора, Дилип Дакунха, который говорил об идее воды и реки, и, по сути, реки, будучи изобретением человека, да, как бы линию, которую мы рисуем на карте, говоря, что здесь суша заканчивается, и здесь начинается вода, не существует, ее изобрел человек. И, по сути, наводнение, как само происшествие, это тоже изобретение человека, потому что в природе, по сути, нет такого понятия, как наводнение. Есть естественные процессы, через которые проходит вода, и когда мы застраиваем пойму, и вода переходит нашу вымышленную линию, по сути, мы называем это наводнением. И мой второй профессор Кейторов, который говорила о важности включения общественности в такие проекты. Вот. Я бы хотел еще немного поговорить больше про книгу «Дизайн с природой» архитектора Ян Макарга. По сути, что он делал в 69-м еще, он занимался геопространственным анализом, или то, что мы сегодня называем ГИС. По сути, как бы, если кто-то работал или видел карты ГИС, где мы используем слои или смотрим на территорию через слои, да, слой дорог, слой зданий, слой озеленения или множество слоев озеленения. Эта модель называется слоеный пирог. И он был именно создателем этой модели, когда он говорил о рассмотрении ландшафта, рассмотрении территории как о многослоевой системе, многослойной системе, на которую нельзя смотреть как бы просто на поверхность, а нужно понимать ее слои, понимать взаимосвязь между слоями, как гидрология, геология, атмосфера, гидросфера и так далее. И также необходимо понимать хронологию ландшафта, в смысле, что происходило в прошлом месяце, что происходило в прошлом сезоне, год назад, 10 лет назад, 100 лет назад на этой территории, чтобы сделать решение о будущем. Да, в смысле информировать решения о будущем этой территории, основываясь на знаниях о прошлом этого ландшафта. И, по сути, как бы один из его последователей, один из его учеников создает Эзри. Это то, что мы знаем как ArcGIS сегодня, ArcMap, который мы все используем как архитекторы, градостроители во время планирования стратегий для городских пространств. И если мы посмотрим как бы через его взгляд, через вот этот слоеный пирог на Москву, и именно посмотрим на климатические уязвимости Москвы, да, которые она будет встречать в ближайшем будущем, то это у нас подтопление, это эффект теплового острова. Эффект теплового острова означает нагрев центра территории, центра города из-за того, что материалы, которые мы используем в градостроительстве, это бетон, асфальт, они удерживают намного больше тепла. Они имеют большую термомассу и нагреваются намного сильнее и держат это тепло дольше, чем ландшафт, деревья, природа, одним словом. Вот. И также мы видим риски эрозии, да, эрозия, которая возникает во время обмывания территории, обмывания ландшафтом постоянными потоками. Вот. И основываясь как бы на вот этих рисках, да, чтобы адресовать эти риски одной системой, мы исследовали проект, который называется «Москва. Город 150 рек». Тут первый вопрос о том, сколько рек в Москве находится. В Москве, по сути, существует речная сеть 150 ручьев, малых рек, потоков и так далее. Ну, мы часто не воспринимаем город, столицу, как город на реке. Да, это не Питер, это не Амстердам, это город, где есть река Москва, но ее присутствие очень редко ощущается, потому что даже наши взаимоотношения с этой рекой, опять же, уходят вот в этот период, когда мы смотрим на нее издалека, мы на нее любуемся, нам до нее не дотронуться или и не дойти. Но эта сеть 150 рек на самом деле существует в городе, половина из нее закопана в коллекторы, это такие большие туннели, большие трубы, куда мы убрали много наших рек, и не только в Москве, а в целом во многих городах, которые были основаны на реках, потому что со временем мы начали их загрязнять, они становились больше как бы неприязнью и какой-то проблемой для города, нежели как ресурсом. Хотя многие города, построены на реках, как раз-таки рассматривали реки и воду как ресурс изначально. Они поэтому и строились на реках, потому что вода предоставляла им транспорт, еду, воду и так далее. Вот. И если мы посмотрим на гидрологический цикл города, который стоит на реке, да, на его естественное состояние, вообще, скажем, литоральной зоны или вот этой территории, которая находится между водой и землей, то у нас происходит восстановление грунтовых вод через поверхностные воды, в смысле дождь просачивается через почву, он начинает восстанавливать грунтовый горизонт. Береговая линия защищена от эрозии корневыми растениями, да, растениями, которые находятся у воды, они корневой системой удерживают почву, не дают ей уйти в воду. Также вода имеет способ к самоочищению, она самоочищающая потихоньку и так далее. Когда мы начинаем застраивать город, мы начинаем уменьшать количество проницаемых покрытий, мы повышаем температуру материалами, которые мы используем в градостроении. Дождь, который не может просочиться через асфальт или бетон, начинает собираться на улицах. Если он не помещается в ливневую канализацию, то при сильных дождях он начинает загрязнять наши реки. Да? Каждый раз, когда идет дождь в больших городах на реках, они чаще всего загрязняют свои реки. Вот. И, по сути, мы говорим о том, как может выглядеть город, который будет восстанавливать этот гидрологический цикл и одновременно адаптироваться к тем вызовам, которым город встретится в связи с изменениями климата, да, на которые мы смотрели на предыдущем слайде. Это повышение температуры поверхности, наводнение во время пиковых осадков, да, что происходит очень часто у нас во время пиковых дождей, сильных дождей. Инфраструктуру, которую мы спроектировали, опять же, в 19-20 веках, она просто не была рассчитана на такие потоки воды, на такое количество воды и не может ее вместить в себя. И эта вода начинает скапливаться как бы на поверхности, затапливая наши пешеходные переходы, тротуары, а также собирая всю грязь и потом в дальнейшем загрязняя реку. Вот. И другая важная мысль, которую нужно заметить, это то, что по сути река не останавливается или не начинается на административных границах города. Москва-река – это часть сложной гидрологической системы, и то, что мы видим здесь, это, по сути, водосборный бассейн Москвы-реки. Да? Это площадь территории, с которой вода стекает, чтобы достичь самой реки Москва. То, по сути, когда мы говорим про Москву-реку, это не просто линия на карте, это вся вода, которая в нее входит. Да? Все эти ручьи, все эти малые реки и так далее. И Москва-река – это часть водосборного бассейна Волги. И Волга – это часть водосборного бассейна Каспийского моря. То есть, по сути, вода, которую мы видим в Москве-реке, одним днем дойдет до Каспийского моря. И все, что происходит внутри этого города, ну и в других городах, которые находятся на этой реке, имеет последствия на города ниже по течению. В смысле, то, что происходит здесь, не только касается людей, которые живут в Москве, но также людей, которые будут, и экосистем, которые находятся ниже по течению. И, как я уже сказал, в Москве более 600 километров речной сети, половина из нее заточена вот в эти коллекторы, вот в эти бетонные трубы, которые были спроектированы в 19-20 веках. Это частично более 500 улиц, которые проходят над этими коллекторами, над этими туннелями. И если мы подумали бы о процессах восстановления этих ручей, да, как бы на английском это называется daylighting, или как бы создание лучного, как бы открытие их дневному свету, да, раскрытие их, восстановление, потому что они не исчезли, они все равно существуют там. Просто убирая реки под землю, мы лишаем их экологической ценности. Они не имеют доступ к воздуху, к солнечному свету и, по сути, не могут очищаться или никакого биоразнообразия не имеют. И мы в ходе этого видения, да, Москвы к 2050 году, которая могла бы быть адаптирована к вызовам изменения климата, мы говорили о 3 примерах. Первая локация – это Цветной бульвар, который, может быть, мы все знаем, под которым находится река Неглинка. Это одна из первых рек, которая была убрана под землю в коллектор. И, кстати, она была даже убрана в 2 коллектора, потому что первый коллектор, в котором она была убрана, она больше не помещалась, и был создан другой, более большой коллектор. Но все равно в некоторых местах при пиковых осадках, при больших дождях, мы все равно можем замечать как бы небольшие потопы, потому что эта вода уже не входит в эту инфраструктуру, которая пытается ее сдержать, потому что, по сути, у вас под ногами находится целая река. И Цветной бульвар стал неким вот этим подражанием тех первых картинок, которые я вам показывал, про то, что природа — это в первую очередь что-то эстетическое, нежели что-то функциональное. И здесь мы закрываем естественные функции ландшафта в трубу, накладывая на нее, по сути, я бы не сказал, это искусственное, то, что мы видим здесь, да, с цветами наверху, но исходя из каких-то более эстетических качеств был выбран этот ландшафт. Да, это то, что вот мы видим сегодня, как это выглядит бульвар. Но мы говорили о том, что чтобы, если сохранить это общественное пространство, сохранить этот бульвар, но к 2050 году мы могли бы представить себе пространство, которое восстанавливает этот ручей, эту реку, Неглинку под собой, и создание некого нового бульвара, да, Цветной бульвар 2050, где ландшафт имеет функциональную ценность. Он становится частью городской инфраструктуры, которая понижает температуру поверхности, удерживает количество осадков во время пиковых дождей, да, вот, потому что у нас нет четкой линии между водой и сушей. Здесь некий градиент, как бы некое террасное повышение береговой территории. Да, и некоторые территории могут быть затоплены во время сильных ливней и быть использованы как общественное пространство во время солнечной погоды. Похожая ситуация у нас на Гоголевском бульваре, где под ним проходит ручей Чартары, который тоже был убран в коллектор, в трубу. По сути, это вот как он выглядит сейчас. И как мы представляли, он мог бы выглядеть, если бы этот ручей можно было бы восстановить. Да? Все равно сохраняется общественное пространство, как бы пешеходный поток, но одновременно это пространство становится многофункциональным, восстанавливается биоразнообразие, удерживаются пиковые осадки во время сильных дождей и так далее. И если вам интересно, вы можете посмотреть или почитать побольше про это исследование на нашем веб-сайте strelkb.com в нашем медиа-центре. У нас есть также исследования про зеленые крыши и про зеленую инфраструктуру для защиты городов от наводнений на примере города Тулуна. Конечно же, это видение, это исследование не говорит о том, что завтра мы побежим копать ручей Чартары или Неглинку. Его цель больше служить как неким открытием диалога и донесением до общественности информации о том, что другие решения существуют. Да, мы не всегда должны иметь дело с какой-то проблемой через постройку бетонных стен или бетонных труб. Мы можем думать о каких-то многофункциональных решениях, которые помогут городу быть более гибким и адаптироваться к разным вариантам сценария будущего. И, конечно же, важно отметить, что в целом такие решения, такие проекты должны становиться частью городских стратегий. И это то, что мы видим уже в каких-то северноевропейских городах или американских городах, то, что пространственные стратегии включают в себя nature-based solutions или green infrastructure, зеленую инфраструктуру и так далее. И делается это с учетом того, что этим городам нужно будет адаптироваться к последствиям изменения климата. И эти решения, о которых мы говорим сегодня, наиболее эффективные и во многих случаях дешевые, нежели чем строить большие инфраструктурные бетонные проекты, которые могут быть не готовы к разным сценариям, к разным поворотам будущего. У меня все. Спасибо большое за ваше внимание. Я буду рад ответить на вопросы.
Well, Nabi, thank you very much for your very, very interesting presentation. Actually, did you know that Holland, already for centuries in the Netherlands, we fought against the water? That's a bit also the lying fighting against the water. Thank you, Marianne, also joining the conversation. Did you know it, Nabi? Our fight against the water?
Yes. I'm a bit confused. I don't know, should I answer you in English or should I be
For me, it would be great if you can talk in English, please. Yes.
Yes, of course.
I think, sorry, Marianne and me.
Well, when I was a student, when I was an architecture student in my third year, what happened in New York was the infamous Hurricane Sandy. This hurricane hit not only the New York, but also all of the East Coast of the United States. And that was a harsh reality that we had to understand, that the city will have to adapt to this new climate, right? Before the hurricane, it was kind of, well, the climate change is happening, but it's happening somewhere far away from me. But when the Sandy hit, everybody realized, no, it's here. And the first designers that New Yorkers went to were Dutch, because Dutch at that, Netherlands at that point were almost the only ones who had the experience of living with water, or building on water and rebuilding on water for centuries, essentially at that point. And then thinking about, I love that you spoke about the Room for Water project, right? Giving the room for water, which is at that point for New Yorkers might have been a crazy idea. And then it's a crazy idea here today. The fact that you would be giving away space for nature rather than taking it away from it in order to develop. And then we're seeing this paradigm shift, which is amazing. And I think it started in Netherlands.
Yes, can I add, because there's also much more now in experimentation in what we can do on the water. So for instance, in Rotterdam, there's already a test pilot for a floating farm. So there's actually a whole farm like on a boat, but of course, people can live on water, people can harvest from the water. So you know, it's not necessarily giving it away the space, but it's using it in an adaptive way.
Yeah, great. If I may prolong about you mentioned about the Hurricane Sandy, Nabi. I think that in Holland, I stick a little bit to Holland because this water is definitely an issue in Holland. And we were always thinking that the flood from the sea would be is still very important to watch how to deal with that. But actually this summer we had a great negative flood in the south of Holland, actually in my region where my parents live, and it came actually from the rivers. And I think nobody expected to have this. Marianne, please tell. Was it? It was an amazing flood. I mean,
it was very frightening.
Expected.
I mean, in Germany it was even worse. There were a lot of incidents and people that died because, of course, whole villages were under threat and underwater. No, nobody expected it in that volume. We were not adapted to it yet. So, but of course, it showed that we really, really need to take water into account as a very big actor for the future.
Definitely, it was really a warning. It is already too late, but it was for the whole Germany, Holland, Belgium a shock what happened only in summer. Half a year ago. So I think it's it must be addressed. And actually, Marianne, you have both. You have a beautiful blue blouse sweater and a green background. And you talked. Your lecture was merely about green, not at all. But I think green and blue, it's so connected. It's
as well as brown, the soil. I mean, that's the whole point of nature-based solutions. You cannot separate functions of nature anymore. I mean, people are already asking about what is then the new narrative or an ecosystem services. That's also a term that basically makes nature a commodity Ecology serves human beings, and of course we do things because we do it for our humanity, but nature is much more than only serving us. It's in itself a very important thing, and it has an intrinsic value. So you cannot separate blue, green, and for instance the soil or the air. And I think Nabi also gave a great examples of what they do in Moscow with this, because they do it in an integrated manner.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Marianne, during our preparation, you talked about a book I have to check. The book is called, let me see. The Wizard and the Prophet, of maybe it was a lecture by Charles Mann.
Yes.
And I was quite interested, and what I picked from it, there are more or less two, but you know better, two ways how to deal with all this. And one is, as I understood, that you use less, or have technology find solutions. Can you?
It's also interesting because what I understand from the comments in the Q&A in the chat, because a lot of them are in Russian, so my Russian is very rusty, not existent at all. But what I try to understand, also one question was, what are the new competencies and new things that people have to learn to make these cities green? And that's, of course, everybody's always, what can we do? I mean, you can say these are the big challenges, and then what's now? What is the action? What can I do when I leave this lecture? What can I do? And Charles Mann said, okay, basically he studied two scientists from the last century that had a completely different position. And it's really worthwhile to read it, because it's about one, the prophets, and one, the wizards. He used these metaphors. The wizard is the scientific guy or girl, man or woman that thinks everything can be fixed. So if we do eco-engineering, if we make the right technology, if we have nature-based solutions, we can save the planet. Biodiversity will come back, climate adaptation will happen, we can put, the Netherlands will be rescued, we will not disappear in water. So that's the optimistic, progressive person that believes everything is possible with innovation and technology. Then the prophets, of course, they're archetypes, so they are on purpose put separate, and a lot of people are both, a bit more or less. But the prophet says, no, we cannot fix everything with modern science, because modern science is actually the problem of it all. So we do what, I'm really curious also what Nabi thinks of this. We really have to set our boundaries much straighter, and we have to listen to the boundaries that the earth gives to us. That's what the prophet says. We cannot do everything by technology. We have to change our behavior. We have to change our mindset. We have to consume less, not fly so much, eat less meat, redivide our incomes, and not have so many rich people on the earth that, you know, waste and throw away and don't give something. So we really need to look at the boundaries of the earth. And so these two are very often opposite in discussions. And of course, the truth's in the middle, but I would really like to ask you, Nabi, how, if you talk about these things in Moscow, if you talk a bit with your fellow colleagues, what do you think? Do you have more wizards or more prophets in your teams?
I think probably prophets, I would say, but I think there's an equal amount of both, actually. We try to, at least within Stroke KB, we try to keep the balance in. And I agree with you that we cannot just rely on the, at this point, non-existing technologies yet, you know, in order to save us in the future. But it doesn't mean that we should not be pursuing them. We have to be pursuing them, but at the same time, we need to be adapting to already happened climate change, right? Because even tomorrow, by waving a magic wand, we eliminate all of our carbon footprint, there is still already change happened within the atmosphere that we already can see, right? And then I think the summer was very evidentful, right? That we could see these changes happening. We will have to at least adapt to them, right? But we also realize that there is no magic wand, right? So we would have to be adapting to what is happening today, right now, right? And not only 2021, because like the past summer, for example, for those who were in Moscow, it was extremely hot. It was a record-breaking heat wave. And actually 10 years ago, right? So it's not just like a new thing. 10 years ago, the heat in Russia was named the deadliest one in all over the globe by the United Nations. So first we have this understanding that Russia is like a very northern country and the heat is not the problem. But in many cities, because of the urban island effect, we are experiencing extreme heat, right? And then extreme heavy rainfalls that follow them. So this is the reality that we will have to address like today. And at the same time, think about what would be happening, right? According to multiple scenarios and be adapting to them.
Yep.
But also think about what are the other like planetary scale infrastructures and regulations that would have to be taken in place, have to take place in order to mitigate climate change long term. So I think short term, long term, and they do not cancel each other out. You have to have kind of a phases, right? And then a step-by-step approach, but thinking at multiple scales at the same time.
Yeah, the same accounts for global and local, because we talk about now, of course, on smaller projects on a specific place, but we have, of course, huge global challenges, and we have also a global system that, for instance, what happened in Glasgow 2 weeks ago, we see the limitations also of having global meetings in getting progress for climate action. But what is very often a burden is also an opportunity. So the global connections between cities worldwide, we have now started in Rotterdam, they started huge websites. It's just one example of closer cities. So what can cities learn from each other worldwide, and how can we learn how to do that? So how can we connect people in positive ways to exchange knowledge and expertise? So that's another suggestion for the listeners. Look at closercities.nl or .org. I will put it in the chat later, and also add your case studies, because we really and also, I mean, Russia in itself is of course a huge size, service, and challenge. How can you connect with each other? That's also a very important question.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And Marianne, you went also to Tomsk. So did I misunderstand or understand well that you also have a living lab over there, or?
Yes, well, when I visited Tomsk,
please tell us. Please tell us a bit about it.
Yeah. Well, when I was there, it's now 3-4 years ago, 3 years, I think, before COVID, and there was this incredible amount of enthusiastic people from Tomsk that showed me around. They started then, at that time, inspired by a visit they had in the Netherlands, and also to my place, Wageningen. I met them all, and that's why I also went back. They were inspired to start this living lab. So they invited scientists, people from the government, local citizens, and they have adopted several streets and initiatives to make it greener in Tomsk. So it's fantastic. What I really loved there, it was of course a bit of a culture shock, but that's, lots of people said to me, well, actually rain is not a problem, snow is the problem. We have so many months of snow, and that's really a big problem here. So of course also a living lab is very context specific. Somebody asked about laboratories. We call it a laboratory because you innovate with each other, you pioneer with each other, you collect data, you analyze the data. We call it a living lab because there is no boundary. In a classic laboratory, you have a boundary. Nobody can get in, Nobody, there are no influences from outside. But of course, in a real life context, you have these influences. That's why we call it a living lab. There are no boundaries. Everything is permeable. That's what they call it. Yes, things can go in and out. So yeah, Tom's, I have really beautiful memories about the enthusiasm of people, the willingness, the action orientedness, and also with a little resources doing a lot of things, because people always think money is the most important, but it's not. Most important is people that are having a creative mindset, are open to the future, have a long-term goal, are open to cooperation. And this is also what the new generations can teach us and each other.
Okay, yes, great. Nabi, you mentioned during your lecture, and that interested me quite a lot, that and it's quite philosophical, that we, when the river bumped out of its borders, we people call it a flood. For nature, actually, it's just a thing that happens already for centuries, for millions of years. Actually, I read briefly about this book, Alternatives of Growth by Harvey McCains, already in 1969. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. But actually, what he mentioned, he questioned, is human part of nature in this case? So what do you think? What's your opinion?
I think human is definitely part of nature. I think more importantly, to think of human and let's say a city, right? A human creation, like a city, urban environment, as a separate entity from nature is hurtful, because a city or a human can never be apart from nature, because everything he builds, all of the processes that he creates, right? If I take the fuel from the ground and I put it into my car, and then the car converts this into energy that is released in the atmosphere, and then I build out of the concrete, and then I take concrete out of the nature. All of these things, they always connected to nature. And I think thinking about us as separate entities is what brings us to the situations where we are finding us today, right? This understanding that nature is somewhere far and the city is separate, so whatever we're doing here does not have an effect on nature. So like that sort of this thinking, this is what it propagates, right? This idea that whatever we are doing in the city, that is for the city, right? And there is no place for the nature in the city, or there's a separate place for the nature in small parks or something like this. This is never the case. Whatever we're doing as humans have effect on nature, and we have to keep this in mind, and we have to keep this in mind as we are moving forward, right, and designing something new. Mm-hmm. And creating hybrid spaces, right, understanding accepting nature as a part of our environment. It could be the urban environment, and realizing that it also may be part of our infrastructure, and stop thinking of nature as something separate from us, or thinking that nature is just something beautiful in the background, you know?
Hey.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, good message, I think. Thank you. Marianne, you got, there were quite some questions already in the Q&A, yes. And you also answered quite some of them. Would you like to pick one of them, or?
Yeah, I'm really multitasking here, because I'm also asking people to try to phrase them in English. Yeah. The question I really liked was from the ones that I now understood, of course. Let me see, where are they? Yeah, here they are. Yeah, it's a bit. Oh yeah, this is. I said, yeah, that's the one that I said. Marianne, do we need to have a profession, of a designer in order to change urban spaces to be more sustainable, and what competences will help to enter the environment of professional in the Netherlands. So I say, yeah, absolutely, it's essential, and we have this a little bit in landscape architecture already, but also in some of the design and architecture studies. And we have a lot of projects for people to integrate nature in their architecture. And actually what Nabi said, nature is then not anything more nice to have, it's need to have. So you need, but you also need to have, if you want to do this, competencies like empathy for different types of people, and you have to have a business mind, but also an ecology mind, and how to integrate this. Cooperation, be creative, but also be optimistic about the future. Huh? That's already in itself a competency if you look what everything's happening. So I like that question a lot from Nastia Green. Because I think it's relevant. The people that are here in this lecture, you can all go that path and integrate nature in your work. And I think it's very interesting also to develop these competences like empathy and open-mindedness and creativity, and if you have them, to meet other people that have it as well, also because it makes your life much better.
Yeah,
and much
so the
more
21st
exciting.
century skills, observing and reflecting, criticism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then a very important aspect is also focus on inclusion. So really look who is the end user of what I'm doing. Don't forget about people, but really have a look who is there that will benefit. And yeah, be careful not to forget people. People from different backgrounds, different social economic status, well, different cultures, religions, etc. So that's also a very important one. Be inclusive to all people in your area, in your urban, in your neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Nabi, I switch to you. The area is swamped. So I read it literally. The area is swamped and is part of the ecosystem of other water bodies. How can we protect buildings from high groundwater and at the same time not to disturb the ecosystem, but on the contrary, carefully protect it?
Well, I think, well, first of all, it would be useful for us to really understand the situation, right? So it sometimes can be hurtful to suggest something, some design decisions without understanding all of the context. So first of all, we need to understand exactly what is happening or what is the situation. But in general, I would say that there are times where we should not be building at some areas in general, right? There are some areas that should not be developed or developed in a very specific manner, right? With very specific rules, right? We cannot be copy pasting one typology everywhere on all types of landscapes, no matter what is happening on the ground or underground, right? So first of all, maybe there is a case in this situation where we should not be building there in the first place, right? Another situation could be, well, we could be building, but maybe it's not residential. Or if it is residential, then perhaps the first floor is elevated, right? Or it's elevated on stilts, right? Or the first floor is unoccupiable. So like there's no bedrooms or something like that. So there could be many answers, but I think we would have to always be site specific. And to be site specific, you need to do site analysis. Like that's kind of a long answer. But in general, I think we should not be afraid of stepping back from a river, for example. It does not mean that you have to create human exclusion zone, right? You can have public space there, right? Multi-purpose public space, right? Something like this, but not always like put a parking garage there or something like that, right?
Definitely, and I think there are already beautiful examples. Actually, I saw the waterfront of Yekaterinburg. Maybe you know that one, and it is a really great recreational space, and yeah, it's lovely to hang around And then I think it's a great mixture of having this ecological way of looking at the how do you say, at the lake and the city. Let me see. Marianne, did you pick one, or shall I pick one for you?
I have one. It's from an anonymous attendant, so I can unfortunately not say who asked it, but this person asked, what about new risks involved? So a bit what we already discussed. For instance, if a peat bog bursts into flames, or mosquitoes and illnesses because of new swarms, etc. We do also a lot of research in that, and we believe, our hypothesis is that if you build an ecosystem, especially with insects, you have to find their natural enemies as well. We have, for instance, now we look at ticks. If you have more biodiversity in the city, you get more tick-borne related diseases, so disease of Lyme, for instance. Okay, so how do you deal with that? So we want to try scenarios in which the natural system itself can deal with these illnesses. But of course, that's not always possible. As high technology has risks, also nature has risks, and we have to learn and educate ourselves to be safe. Children, if they play in a park that is very wild with all kinds of flowers and shrubs, they have more health risks, maybe. So there's also always this human factor, also how to adapt to these changes. That's very relevant.
Yeah. And I'm thinking also about the new, how do you say, diseases. I don't know it in English at all. Oh my God, what did I start? The eikenbos processierups. The processierups. Do you know?
Yeah, that's there's a caterpillar. The caterpillars that they make nests, and these nests are very sticky. If they irritate your skin, and you get skin burns. And you can of course cut the tree, because then the caterpillar is gone. But you can also tell people, one thing is, if you don't plant only oaks, then there will be less caterpillars, because they get their monoculture, which they're very happy. It's like giving people French fries every day, So you have to make shrubs and trees that they are not so invited to grow so excessively. Yeah. We have to get rid of monocultures. So we have to increase diversity so that nature can also sort itself out.
Yeah, like the birds which eat these caterpillars.
For instance. And then, if you know that there is a caterpillar in that tree, well, then you just walk another path. That's also an option. So, I mean, it's not sometimes, people, of course, tend to look at risks and health risks. And this is really important to study this and to see how we can overcome this, especially in very, very, very highly dense populated areas, because people are themselves also risks there. Mm-hmm. Driving a car, criminality. So, I mean, it's important.
Yeah. Jerke, are you still there? Knock, knock.
Well, where else would I be?
I think you might have a question.
No, I have a question that I raised from the audience also. I just thought it would be interesting for Nabi, actually, because a lot of people were in shock about the 150 rivers in Moscow, of course, and. What you showed us about the boulevard, the rings in Moscow, Gogol, Tsvetnoy Boulevard, we see the same happening in the Netherlands. Utrecht got new canals back into the city. Question is, how does the city government look upon those plans? Are they looking at actually implementing this? Who would pay for this? Or is this mere futuristic design? So there was a question from the audience about it.
I believe the response from the city was actually quite swift, quite quick after we released our vision, right? I would call it a vision or a concept. And the response was sort of, it is kind of nice, but we will probably not be doing this in the near future. And I can understand this response, again, what we were trying to do is not to say that this is what we're doing tomorrow or even a year or maybe 2 years later, but to create or give the public a vision of an alternative future, right? Not the vision of the future where we're like flying on the cars or whatever, but the vision where the city, to address, first of all, the need of the city of Moscow to for adapting to climate change, because this will have to happen. And in fact, on the federal level, the regions of Russia will have to adapt to, they will have to create plans of adaptation, climate adaptation, by the end of the next year. And Moscow, along with St. Petersburg, is considered a city region, right? So Moscow will have to have a plan of climate adaptation. And they will have to, I hope, include some of use of nature-based solutions or green infrastructure in their plan of adaptation. It might not be opening up Tsvetnoy Boulevard or Gogol Boulevard. It might not be that. It might be something on a much smaller scale, but along the, in the same logic, right? Following the similar logic. At least maybe we can get bioswales, right? Or bioretention cells. These are kind of, I guess, terminologies, but essentially a smaller scale solutions of the ideas that we were talking about. So our aim was to kind of go big so we can maybe land somewhere in the middle, right? But also give the track. This is where we are looking at. And what you also have, I saw this question as well, and I was thinking about it. And one of the things that we will have to also keep in mind is that creation of all this infrastructure or all those spaces, these projects, first of all, it's multifunctional. So by investing in it, you're investing in public space, in urban health, in infrastructure, and etc. Right? The biodiversity increase and etc. Whether while if you're investing in just the pipe or a bigger pipe, you're just investing in that pipe. That pipe will only serve as a drainage, as a means of transferring water from point A to point B, and maybe not even doing that during heavy rains. So on one side, it will be the necessity, right? And then this is what we are seeing being done in Netherlands as well, right? This is not something that we just dream up. But it's an international best cases that we were talking about in the research. We talk about Netherlands as well. Actually, on the website, we bring examples from Netherlands, and also it will be the tool of development as well. So what we are seeing in many cities is that by creating, let's say, daylighting or restoring a river, historic river, increases property values adjacent to this area. So the development could potentially also be paying for projects like this. And they would get their money back because they would be increasing their property value.
And now we all want to come and see it. So all the tourists and architects and landscape architects wants to come by train to Moscow, by high-speed train, and see about it. Sorry.
No, and I think we have a lot of people in the audience today who would love to see it as well and help actually work on this. And I don't know if, Marianne, if you are at any way, if you know about the memorandum of understanding, the MOU that has been signed between your university, Wageningen University and Research, and HSE University last week by Rector Louise Fresco, that Wageningen will actually help HSE University developing a new curriculum for studies connected to these topics. So it's another nice opportunity for you to come and maybe we can have these live talks with people in Moscow. And it's also a way of working towards the future, educating young people and exchanging experiences. Because of course, obviously, we in the Netherlands it took us decades, of course, to work out all these solutions and closing rivers and opening them up again, etc., etc. Pascal, I think we should end it.
Yeah.
because we are it's
Definitely.
6:30 in the
Yeah.
Netherlands, 8:30 in Moscow.
Yeah.
And I want to thank Marianne, Nabi, and you, of course, Pascal, for two excellent lectures again. Very much relevant for today's world. And I really, Pascal, like what all the topics they really come nicely together. And what it also shows, and that Marianne and Nabi both send us message today. We cannot do it alone. We cannot only talk about nature-based solutions. We have to bring everything together to come to the right solutions. So, dear audience, thank you very much for joining our 5th lecture. We have one lecture left, which is called Living Future, where we discuss this Thursday, 7 o'clock Moscow time, with Bob Hendricks, a rather interesting and famous Dutch designer who has some interesting stories to tell, and Timur Burbayev, who is actually lecturing at HSE University, but also is the art director of Art Lebedev, well-known studio. So Pascal will be with us, of course, again to moderate this. The translators will be here. A separate thanks to the translators. You got some comments and thank yous in the chat as well. You're doing a great job. Marianne shared a lot of links. My colleague Yelena Chipanina is sharing them again in the Telegram app. So we all stay connected like this. Once again, spasiba Nabi, spasiba Marianne, spasiba Pascal. Thank you, dear audience. Looking forward to seeing you this Thursday.